You are a good person. You don't cause trouble. You smile at people you don't like. You agree to things you don't want to do. And when something actually matters to you, you stay quiet. You think this is maturity. You think you are protecting yourself. But you are not. You are erasing yourself. Look back at the last 5 years of your life. How many days do you actually remember? What did you risk? Nothing. Because risk means you might get hurt, and you have built a perfect, quiet fortress to keep the pain out. But the fortress is completely empty. You are not safe. You are just a ghost haunting your own routine. This is not a story about a broken heart. This is a story about the specific, suffocating terror of being completely harmless. Sabahattin Ali died with his face in the mud on the Turkish-Bulgarian border in 1948. He was 40 years old. He was fleeing a government that wanted him dead for his writing, for his politics, for his refusal to be silent. They sent someone after him. A man he thought was helping him escape put a bullet in him and left his body in the dirt. Sabahattin Ali was many things, but he was not passive. He wrote with venom. He loved with recklessness. He was arrested. He was beaten. He screamed his beliefs into the void, even when the void screamed back with violence. He did not die quietly. And yet, somehow, this man created Raif Efendi, a character so passive that his existence is a slow-motion suicide. A man so utterly incapable of action that he lets his entire life collapse into dust rather than make a single uncomfortable phone call. Why would a man who bled for his truth create a protagonist who rots in his own cowardice? Because Raif is not a hero. Raif is a warning label, a monument to what happens when you choose comfort over reality. Sabahattin Ali built Raif Efendi the way you build a scarecrow, to frighten you, to show you the thing you might become if you let fear do the driving. Raif Efendi works in a soap factory. He does his job. He does not complain. He does not make waves. His father wanted him to be something else, and Raif folded immediately, because conflict is a kind of death to him, a death more terrifying than the slow erasure of working a job that means nothing to him for decades. And here is the poison that everyone misses when they call this book a love story. Raif thinks his passivity is a virtue. He genuinely believes that by refusing to engage, by swallowing his anger, by nodding and agreeing, and never ever raising his voice, he is being moral, he is being good. He tells himself that the world is cruel and loud, and he is different, he is sensitive, he is deep. But sensitivity without action is just narcissism in a gentle mask. He retreats into his inner world, where he is the misunderstood protagonist of his own beautiful tragedy, and the real world keeps spinning, and he contributes nothing. He is a ghost in his own life, and ghosts do not live. They haunt. The phrase he uses constantly is "bana ne?" What does it matter? What does it matter if they disrespect me? What does it matter if I hate this job? What does it matter if I am invisible? And every time he says it, he is not being wise. He is administering a little dose of spiritual arsenic. He is killing the part of him that might have fought back. Because here is the unbearable truth. When you say, "What does it matter?" enough times, eventually, nothing does. You flatten the landscape of your own life until there are no hills to climb, no valleys to fall into, just a flat beige, nothing that stretches out until you die. Raif thinks he is protecting himself. He's actually building his own prison, one brick of avoidance at a time. Then Berlin happens. Then Maria Puda happens. And everyone wants to talk about her like she is some kind of romantic ideal, some manic pixie dream girl who teaches the sad man to feel again. No, Maria is not a quirk. Maria is life. Maria is the thing Raif has been running from his entire existence. She is loud. She is chaotic. She is an artist, which means she creates, which means she acts, which means she leaves evidence that she existed. She argues with him. She challenges him. She does not let him sit in his comfortable fog of self-pity. And Raif, for one fragile moment, steps into the arena. He lets himself want something. He lets himself be seen. And it is terrifying. It is the most terrifying thing he has ever done. Because when you have spent your entire life being invisible, visibility feels like standing naked in a spotlight, while everyone you have ever known throws stones. They have something. Whatever it is real. It is the first real thing Raif has ever touched. And then his father dies. Duty calls. He has to go back to Turkey. And here is where the story splits. Here is where people who skim the surface think this is about distance or bad luck or the cruelty of circumstance. It is not. It is about choice. Raif goes back to Turkey. They write letters. Maria's letters are full of life, full of plans, full of her. And then the letters stop. Just stop. Silence. What does a man do when the woman he claims to love goes silent? If you are a man who is capable of action, you get on a train, you go back to Berlin, you knock on her door, you ask questions, you find out what happened. But Raif does not do that. Raif does nothing. And here is the rancid core of his character. He tells himself a story. He decides, sitting in his comfortable paralysis in Istanbul, that she must have left him. She must have found someone else. She must have realized he was not worth it. And this story, this fiction he invents to avoid the discomfort of actually finding out the truth, becomes his reality. He marries a woman he does not love. He has a child with a woman he resents. He spends 10 years festering in silent bitterness, playing the role of the tragic abandoned lover, the man too deep and too sensitive for this cruel world. 10 years. 10 years of silent dinners. 10 years of sleeping next to someone and feeling nothing. 10 years of watching his son grow and feeling like he is observing someone else's life through a pane of glass. 10 years of going to the soap factory and doing his job and coming home and the fluorescent lights hum and the years drip away like a leaking faucet, and he does not even have the decency to be miserable in an interesting way. He's just numb, a walking anesthetic, and he still thinks he is the victim. He still thinks the world did this to him. And then one day he is walking through the streets of Ankara and he sees a woman. She looks familiar. He follows her, not in a predatory way, in the way of a ghost who thinks he recognizes another ghost. She goes into a building. He finds out who she is. She is a friend of Maria's. And because he is Raif, because he is incapable of direct action even now, he does not introduce himself. He does not ask her directly about Maria. He engineers a way to be near her, to let the information come to him passively, to avoid the confrontation of actually wanting to know. And the woman, eventually, tells him the truth. Maria did not leave him. Maria did not find someone else. Maria got sick. Maria went to a hospital in Berlin. Maria was pregnant. Maria gave birth to a daughter, his daughter, and Maria died. She died alone in a hospital bed a few months after he left. And the baby was put into an orphanage because there was no father listed, because Raif never came back, because Raif never asked, because Raif decided that his invented story was easier to live with than the risk of finding out the real one. He had a daughter. He has a daughter. She's growing up in an orphanage in Berlin, alone, because her mother is dead and her father is a coward. Not a coward because he was scared of war or violence or physical danger. A coward because he was scared of getting on a train. A coward because he was scared of asking a question. A coward because the idea of being rejected was more terrifying to him than the idea of never knowing. And that passivity, that refusal to act, killed his life more thoroughly than any bullet ever could. Sabahattin Ali died with a bullet in his back, but he died doing something. Raif Efendi is alive, sitting in his office, and he is more dead than any corpse. Because he chose it. Every single day, he chose it. This is not a love story. This is a horror story about what happens when you let fear make your decisions. When you tell yourself that staying quiet is the same as staying safe. When you confuse being harmless with being good. Raif thought that by not engaging, by not fighting, by not demanding anything from the world, he was being noble, he was being pure. But purity without action is just emptiness with a halo. He did not protect himself from pain. He protected himself from life. And life, when you refuse to engage with it, does not wait around. It moves on. It happens to other people. And you sit in your chair, and the fluorescent lights hum, and the years eat you alive, one spreadsheet at a time. The reason this book feels so suffocating, the reason it sits in your chest like a stone, is because Raif is not some historical figure from 1940s Turkey that you can dismiss as a product of his time. Raif is the person you are terrified of becoming. He is the voice in your head that says, maybe tomorrow, when you know tomorrow will never come. He is the instinct to refresh your feed instead of sending the email. He is the silent swallowing of the insult because confrontation is uncomfortable. He is the person who goes to the job they hate because quitting is scary. He is the person who stays in the relationship that died years ago because being alone is terrifying. He is every single moment you have ever chosen the path of least resistance and told yourself it was wisdom. And the horror, the real skin-crawling horror, is that there is no dramatic downfall. There is no rock bottom. There is just the slow leak, the gradual disappearing. You do not explode. You evaporate. And one day, you are 45 years old and you look in the mirror and your face has no lines because you have never laughed hard enough or cried hard enough or screamed loud enough to carve anything into your skin. You are smooth and blank and you have done no harm and you have also done nothing at all. And the worst part, the part that makes you want to claw your way out of your own skin, is that Raif had a chance. He had Maria, he had Berlin. He had a moment where life reached out and grabbed him by the collar and said, "Here, this is real, take it." And he did. For a moment, he took it. And then the first obstacle appeared, and he folded. He went back to the default. He went back to the fog. And he spent the rest of his existence telling himself that the world took it away from him, that fate was cruel, that he was a victim of circumstances. But he was not. He was a volunteer. He volunteered for his own erasure. Every single day he woke up and chose it again. You cannot read this book and feel romantic about it unless you are lying to yourself. Unless you are so desperate to avoid seeing your own reflection in Raif that you paint it as a tragic love story, something beautiful and sad that happened to someone else a long time ago. But it is not beautiful. It is grotesque. It is the literary equivalent of watching someone starve to death in a room full of food because they are too afraid to reach out and take it. And Sabahattin Ali, the man who refused to starve, the man who fought and loved and screamed and died with his boots on, wrote this character to hold up a mirror, to say, this is what you become when you let fear win. This is what you become when you choose the comfort of your inner world over the mess of the real one. This is what you become when you are so obsessed with not being hurt that you stop being alive. The modern world is built for Raifs. It is designed to let you disappear. You can work from home. You can order food to your door. You can scroll through the carefully curated highlight reels of other people's lives and never have to risk your own. You can spend decades in a comfortable fog, never too happy, never too sad, just a flat hum of existence that requires nothing from you. And every system, every app, every algorithm is optimized to keep you there, to keep you passive, to keep you consuming instead of creating, to keep you watching instead of doing. And you tell yourself, you are just being careful. You are just waiting for the right moment. You are just protecting yourself. But there is no right moment. There is only now and the slow certainty that if you do not act, the now will become then and the then will become never. And you will wake up one day and realize that you let your entire life happen to someone else. Raif's daughter is in an orphanage. His daughter, the physical evidence that he existed, that he mattered, that he was part of something real, is growing up alone because he could not get on a train, because he could not ask a question, because he chose the story in his head over the reality outside of it. And he will spend the rest of his life knowing that. He will go back to his office. He will go back to his loveless marriage. He will go back to the soap factory, and the fluorescent lights will hum, and he will be harmless, and he will be empty, and he will die without ever having lived, not because the world was cruel, but because he was too afraid to step into it. You are not Raif yet, but you could be. Every time you say, "What does it matter?" you take a step closer. Every time you choose comfort over truth, you take a step closer. Every time you let the fear of rejection stop you from reaching out, you take a step closer. And the terrifying thing is that there is no alarm that goes off. There is no moment where someone shakes you and says, "Wake up, you are disappearing." It just happens, slowly, quietly, until you are a ghost. until you are the person in the meeting who never speaks, until you are the face in the background of someone else's photograph, until you are the name people struggle to remember at the reunion, until you are nothing. Sabahattin Ali died fighting, Raif Efendi died sitting down, and you have to choose which one you are going to be. Not someday, not when you are ready, now. Because the office chair is waiting, and it is very comfortable, and it will hold you until you rot.